All right, here we go. So the Connecticut Memoranda Series, Volume 1. I'm going to review the document that was sent to officials of the state of Connecticut. That is the Attorney General. It was sent certified mail and a few other people in that department. It was hand-delivered to an attorney for the Department of Public Health of Connecticut. She took it in hand. It was given to the governor's office through the mailroom by the official policy of the state capital of Connecticut. He signed for it and stamped it and made sure that the governor would get it. All right, let's go. There is a cover letter. I will go through a little bit of that, named recipients, then the document title, and so forth. And this mostly has to do with acute renal failure, where that is in line with hospital homicides. So I recommend to them in the cover letter for the individually named people as officials of the state of Connecticut. I tell them to seek personal legal counsel. If they give it to the state attorney is then conflicted between representing the individual and representing the state. As an attorney represents the state, they are supposed to be representing the people, like the people of Connecticut, the citizens. Well, if the citizens are being harmed by the state officials, that's a pretty big conflict. I also say notice, that is knowledge that I'm imparting upon them with the detailed factual information gleaned from official Connecticut state records. That knowledge that I give them through this document raises, that's R-A-Z-E-S, that means destroys, levels, the future defense of ignorance of fact. So if in the future they say, well, we didn't know that it was harming people. Well, we didn't know all these people were dying from acute renal failure and pulmonary embolism and thrombocytopenia. We didn't know. Well, now they know. In the second, volume 2, it's even bigger because I say these people died from the vaccine in hours, days, minutes, and I name the people. So this notice raises, it destroys the ignorance of fact defense for the future. I also tell them sovereign and qualified immunity do not apply to criminal acts. Those are used to protect people that work for government from civil litigation. If they make a mistake in the course of doing their job, they won't be personally sued because they have qualified immunity as a servant to the public in their official capacity. Statute of limitations. There are no statutes of limitations for most homicide crimes, of which this is one. If they don't act on information and belief the public is in imminent danger of harm, then they're guilty. And that's the next one, is legal duty to act. They took the job. They have that duty. It's like a lifeguard who takes a job and then watches a kid drown. Once you know, you must perform your legal duty for the safety of the public, else be criminally liable. It's all basically setting them up so that they have the knowledge and they are compelled to do their job. I mean, all they have to do is do their job for the safety of the public. That's what it's all about. And inaction concurrent with a legal duty to act is a criminal act. The named recipients are Ned Lamont, Governor of Connecticut, Susan Deshevich, Lieutenant Governor of Connecticut, Eric Russell, Connecticut Treasurer, Sean Scanlon, Comptroller, William Tong, AG, Manisha Jutani, Commissioner, Department of Public Health, A. Orifice, Chief of Staff of the Department of Public Health, and H. Salton, Special Counsel for the Department of Public Health. They were all copied on this and received it. I actually have a Substack that I wrote, and it has the return receipts such that these packages were signed for. They got them. All right, the title is Memorandum, Notice of Required Action to Thwart Hospital Homicides and Acute Renal Failure Deaths that are currently occurring and were occurring for the last 3 years, 3.5. Evidence compels immediate investigation and correction of injurious federal and state health protocols and mandates. I obtained the death records of Connecticut. I submitted an application to do a study on the regional effects of temperature and humidity on heart disease. That is, the effects of climate change on heart disease. They approved the study and gave me the records. I ran it through my process. I currently am engaged with somebody who's very, very good at math. I asked him to run discrete cosine transforms and discrete Fourier transforms to determine the signal-to-noise ratio of the data streams. That is, how many people died every day of a specific disease or all-cause or COVID or pneumonia, to determine if it's highly seasonal, then it's sinusoidal. That means more people die in the winter than the summer. More older people die in the winter than the summer. Younger people, that's not the case. So in the younger people, it would be a low signal-to-noise ratio. In the older people, it would be a high signal-to-noise ratio. And the same for pneumonia and respiratory diseases, more in the winter than the summer. So I am actually looking at climate change versus heart disease. There isn't that great of a signal for anybody under 65 for anything to do with the heart not more people die in the winter than the summer. So the study is being done. The application for the data was truthful. And ancillary or other significant findings are what this is. Volume 1, 2, 3, and 4 are incidental findings. So in defense of others, I have a duty to inform the Connecticut state officials, which I am doing through this notification in this document. The purpose of the memo is to notify them of an epidemic of acute kidney injury or acute renal failure or sudden kidney failure. So once notified, the Connecticut state officials have a legal duty to investigate the causes of these deaths. And it's a massive number of deaths. Question. This is the question I present to them. Whether a Connecticut state official, knowing that thousands died in a kidney failure epidemic since 2020, is criminally negligent if he does not immediately and earnestly investigate to determine the cause and prevent additional deaths. So will they be criminally negligent if they don't investigate and more people die? And all they have to do is look at the data that I've shown them, look at the hospital records, and they'll know. Acute kidney injury is up 100%. It's the greatest loss of life years in 100 years, more than COVID, more than H1N1 or smallpox, polio, more than all of them in the last 100 years. This is the biggest, and nobody's looking at it, which is why I'm doing this video. Within the document, I put the 3 states, not just Connecticut. So the 3 states for which I have all of the death records since 2015. Connecticut has 1,721 excess sudden kidney failure deaths. That's a lot. It's a lot of people. And it's a lot younger people in COVID. And if you notice, Massachusetts is 3,493. That's almost 3,500. Minnesota is 2,412, 2,400. Thousands and thousands of people in every state are dying from acute kidney injury. And everybody's ignoring it. All the celebrity doctors, all the scientists, they go on talking about all these things where there's 10 here and 5 there. We're looking at thousands of people in every state dying from acute renal failure. It's a wildly out of control epidemic. N17, by the way, is sudden kidney failure. Keep that in mind as we go through here. But you see how much it went up. It was bouncing along at 500, 500, 500, 500, 500, then 625 in 2020. It went up a mere 100. It was almost 1,300 in Connecticut in 2022. It's massive. If you have this much of a signal, you got to wonder, what is the public health department even doing? Why do they even exist if they miss something that's killing thousands of extra people in their state? They don't even look at it. And it's not COVID. If you look on the right in this graph, that's COVID. That's what they purport COVID to be. I don't think 80% of these were really died from COVID, but COVID was around in 2020 and less in 21, less in 22, and less in 23. So as COVID's going down, acute renal failure was going up. Does that make any sense? If COVID was causing this, it would be positively correlated. Instead, it's inversely correlated. So it's not COVID. It's not COVID causing this. The Connecticut Department of Public Health makes no mention of the acute kidney injury epidemic. This is a snapshot from their website. There's nothing there. They don't have anything about kidney. It's a mass casualty event, once in a century event in 100 years. They make no mention of it. In fact, I wonder if they even know about it. The Connecticut Department of Public Health's mission is to monitor public health. And yet, are they ignorant of this, or are they just trying to hide it from the public? I don't know. It's an inexcusable failure. I would have hoped that in the last 2 months since I sent this document to them, somebody would have called me and said, hey, can you explain this to us? Or, wow, we got to go to the press and tell them acute kidney failure is one of the biggest things that's ever happened in Connecticut since World War II in the past 100 years. So I write, this is a quote from the document, early investigation and remediation likely would have saved thousands of Connecticut lives as young as 25 years old. And in that 25 to 44 range that you see, that's just the 25 to 44 age range that you see in this graph. Yeah, it may not seem like a lot of people, but this is just Connecticut. There are 3.6 million population. Imagine killing 63 people, excess, more than normal, in the age group of 25 to 44. If a couple of school buses go off a bridge and everybody dies, that's big news. But when they can spread these deaths across a few years and hide them where they're actually causing them from man-made interventions, then, they just want to hide it. They don't want to address it. I don't want to get caught up being too negative and blaming, but they haven't done anything. It's been 2 months since I gave them this document. They hope I'll just go away and nobody will call them. Anybody who sees this, anybody in Connecticut at any time, if you ever watch this, you have a duty as a citizen to call them up or to send them a letter and say, what the hell are you doing? Show me the investigation that's ongoing. These are all official records from Connecticut. Here's another quote. The pattern of acute kidney injury seems man-caused, like from policy changes. CMS.gov NCTIP payout program and coercion of doctors by hospital administrators and medical certification boards to use the deadly NIH COVID-19 treatment protocols. You see the top graph, sudden kidney failure. The bottom graph is COVID. And these are smoothed with 51-day rolling average curve smoothing. So something could have happened another 25 days earlier if it was stark. You'll see it 25 days later in the graph. But for the most part, the curve smoothing really helps visualize what happened. And you see on November 2nd, that red line, you see where it says November 2nd? I think you can see my mouse, so I'll do this. It jumps above the gray dashed lines, which I put in for bands. You see, this is normal, and there was a blip in early 2020, right? That's the first COVID wave right there. A lot of old people died also with kidney failure. You say, "Whoa, it's COVID." Well, not really. That takes another explanation that I'll save for another day. But that doesn't explain when COVID went down. Look at what happened over here in the winter of 21 and 22. It's extremely out of control. Not only that, but see how the troughs, the baselines return within the guardrails and they're in the low point. Even in the summer of 2020, look how deep into this band. So after the first wave of COVID, look how low it goes right here. The troughs never go back in that band. They're just touching it up here. And then there are no troughs here. There's a massive amount of deaths. And this lines up, see, COVID, there's your little COVID. And then here's your second one. So it is seasonal. And then look at this bump. The third wave of COVID, as small as it is consistent with this bump. But the troughs are a second signal. And this is what nobody else has found out. All the big doctors and scientists out there with their evidence-based medicine, peer review research, randomized controlled trial, blah, blah, blah. It's basically a box. They were put in a box 30 years ago with EVM, and they can't see outside the box because, science didn't exist before 30 years ago in EVM. We didn't get where we were 30 years ago through a couple hundred years with just the plain old scientific method. No, EBM's much better. They don't realize that it's just a control mechanism, and they're all robots stamping out the same thing over and over using inferential statistical methods, which I ranted in my Substack yesterday. I won't get into that now. What else? The families will never give up. We support you. Somebody lost a family member and knows that this is all true. They did dastardly things in hospitals. And I say there are good people that work at hospitals. They're also not so good people. And nothing has changed over time. My mother was an X-ray technician. She worked in a hospital. Some people were good. Some people were not good. Some people cared for patients. For some people, it was just a job. And to have a patient is an annoyance. They might have to take their break a little later. And so they're angry at the patient for even walking through the doors. It's just the way people are. So for those who see it as just a job, they have no qualms about killing people with certain drugs, just doing what they're told to try to go on with their day. People die, so what? That goes on in hospitals. So let's see, 300% of normal in 22, only the third summer. So in the third summer, notice this little brown line right here. The graph is tuned to this very high COVID peak, but if that peak wasn't there, this would be a big gap in the summer. You can see the space, the white space. It went to zero, it didn't go to zero. Why did COVID not return in the summer to zero? In the third summer, 1, 2, 3. That's negative efficacy. That's just terrible. Next slide. This is complicated. What we have here is, because I have record level source data, I can do sorts on different things. And one of them is, I want to know people who died with acute renal failure. What percentage of them died with COVID also resident on the death record? And for these first 3 waves, the percentage of people who died with acute renal failure was almost 50%. Half of the acute renal failure deaths also had COVID on their death records. They entered a hospital, they got a positive COVID test, they were given a treatment. I'm just going to say it, the treatment's probably what killed their kidneys and killed them. And so on those death records is also the fact that they had COVID, 50%. And then boom, like a switch, after March of 2022, it's at most 13%. And these are, I don't even know what these are, like under 5%. All of a sudden, COVID had nothing to do with the acute renal failure deaths. But if you remember the other graph, look at this graph. Acute renal failure is still going up from this point on. It's higher. Okay, acute renal failure is higher, but none of them have anything to do with COVID. It's a second signal. It's the vaccine. Multi-organ failure with the vaccine. Microclotting, impairing the servicing of the kidneys, which need blood supply to survive, or something else to do with the vaccine. So this shows right here, you have one, it has something to do with COVID, like you go to the hospital for COVID and you get treated and they kill you. And then the other one, all of a sudden, it's got nothing to do with COVID. but it's still getting higher. And what you would say is really the vaccine began in here. And if you were to go back to the other graph, you see in 21, the troughs are not returning to zero in the summer. This is acute renal failure, not COVID up top. The troughs are not returning to zero. It is a steady progressive upswing that coincides with the uptake of the vaccine. More people vaccinated, more people vaccinated, more people vaccinated. And so even in the summertime, that's two separate signals. One is sinusoidal and follows the winter seasonal respiratory virus, COVID, if you want to call it that. And I believe it's a real disease. I don't want to argue with the other people, the no virus people. I don't care. Something is going on in the winter where people get sick, they get nervous because it's difficult to breathe. And you get scared when you can't breathe and you seek help and you go to the hospital, and these people were killed. But you see that the bump and the bump and the bump. And even this bump, that is seasonal. It's a completely separate signal from the troughs, the bottoms of these lines that are also going up. Nobody's taking the vaccine anymore, so then it's going down, but people are still struggling and dying. All right, I hope I got the understanding of this graph out there. The percentage having to do with COVID of the acute renal failure deaths. It's on, then it's off. All right. But the way it manifests in reality is a slowly going up starting in 2021. So this is from paragraph 6 of the Connecticut Memoranda Series, Volume 2. Very likely to be hospital protocol caused acute kidney injury involved death up until early 2022. Tested positive in hospital. Immediately administered remdesivir, then prepped for mechanical ventilation by administration of immunomodulator. Sometimes that was baricitinib, also called Olumiant, an anti-anxiety medication, an opioid pain medication, fentanyl, general anesthetic, a sedative. So this is like midazolam, lorazepam, dexmedetomidine, propofol, and fentanyl. That was the classic one. There are variations of the opioid that was used and variations on the others too. All right, here's another quote. There must be a reason why the correlation practically stopped. Now, remember the last slide. The correlation, right? It practically stopped. Multi-organ failure often includes acute kidney injury, and multi-organ failure is a known effect of COVID vaccination. The two signals are likely from 1, hospital protocols, and 2, gene drug vaccine adverse events. That's what I was saying before. There are two signals. So theories, however, are not evidence. The issue cannot move to what is causing this massive epidemic of AKI until state officials from Connecticut and other states dutifully recognize the epidemic. Yes, it's there. It exists. It's so stark. Nobody can miss it. It's worse than 100 years. And begin an immediate investigation. They should be immediately investigating this. And what I'm saying here is they have all the records. They can immediately investigate this. Also, this is from the COVID-19 treatment guidelines. This notice comes up when I bring up the webpage. The final update of NIH COVID-19 treatment guidelines was on February 29, 2024. So they're already calling it the final update. I don't know if you realize what's going on here. They're telling you in February 29, they're not going to change anything about COVID treatment. Does that mean they're declaring the disease won't ever change, won't ever mutate, won't ever change its causes of symptoms, and that how they're going to treat it is never going to change because it's over? It's the final update. We're not going to do our job anymore on this. And they say PDFs of the guidelines can be downloaded until August 16, 2024, when the website will be shut down. They're going to shut down the website. This government malfeasance in killing the people. People don't think through what are the duties, what is it in reaction to, what are the laws that enable them to do this to us. They're not saying we're treating this disease based on what the disease shows us in society, and we can react to it in weeks, which my system, by the way, can do. If I had access to their servers for what people are going to the doctor for and what people are dying from. It's an early warning system, my system, that can show what people are dying from and find any anomalies. You just write some code, call it AI if you want. It's not really AI. If you hit certain thresholds of anomalous, call it standard deviations above norm, then it would trigger, oh, look at this, B-cell lymphocytic leukemia in these 3 zip codes was 400% of normal for the last 3 weeks. Oh boy, you got a problem. You know, that's the type of thing my system can find and what they should have been doing for the last 30 years in computers. Okay, what does this say? Since remdesivir was recommended by the NIH on April 21, 2020, there appears to be very little change to the recommended COVID-19 treatment program, nor does there appear to be any studies of these treatment protocols in more than 4 years. Final update, February 29, they're shutting the site down August 16. Why? And why didn't they change the protocols from April 21, 2020? They did some little study where they looked at remdesivir. They actually used Massachusetts and some in Connecticut. The remdesivir study that was done, when you look at Massachusetts, it looks nothing like Minnesota because the first wave in Massachusetts had kidney injury in it. But Massachusetts was the site for the biggest remdesivir trial. What a coincidence. In Minnesota, that had a first wave of COVID, they didn't have any excess at all in acute renal failure. And here's what I show. I'm ahead of my graphs. So as you look at this, I call this prevalence of cause on the right. So on the left, each waveform is Minnesota, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. So within this red box, there is no raw data. This is raw data, by the way, with a 51-day rolling average curve smoothing. There is no signal. You see that there's nothing here. This is acute renal failure. But Massachusetts has a big spike of acute renal failure in the first wave of COVID in 2020. This is the spring of 2020. And Connecticut has a little, but substantial. It's substantial. It's a lot more than normal. It's there. Now, what I call prevalence of cause, what is it? And I look at this every day. I take it, I do the 51-day curve smoothing, and then I compare every day, January 1st, 2015 through December 31st, 2023, every single day. And I say, what was the all cause that day? How many people died from all causes? Number of total people who died in the state. And I just divide the two. And that's the prevalence of cause. What is the prevalence of an acute renal failure death on that day in Minnesota or Massachusetts or Connecticut? And the reason I do that is because in this wave right here in Massachusetts, all cause was 8,800 excess people died. A lot of really old people died. And what happened is the old people died with a lot of things. They have ongoing things. Old people have thrombus-related issues. They have kidney-related issues, liver, cancers. And so when you wipe out 8,800 of them in 9 weeks, more than normal, it makes everything go high. But does it go high as a percentage of overall deaths? And that's why I do the division. I divide the two, and it's the prevalence of cause. I haven't seen any of the scientists do this, but it really shows what's actually happening. And when you do that, you see in Minnesota, it's even less, slightly, but there's no signal still. And when you divide by total deaths, I just told you that 8,800 deaths, Massachusetts' big wave over here, it nearly disappears. I have to squint to look at it. There's something there. It was a few more than normal of acute renal failure, but you can actually say, it was that 8,800. That's what did it. So I hope this is being understood because when you go down to Connecticut and you see this substantial spike right here on the left with the raw data, and you go to the right and look at prevalence of cause, there's nothing there. So yeah, there's nothing there. When you divide by all-cause death, you see the prevalence of cause. So what you're looking at is COVID didn't cause this. The acute renal failure deaths, COVID was around for almost a full year in Connecticut, almost a full year before it departed what would be considered normal based on these bands. Okay, AKI was not a major issue in 2020 until December. Don't forget, here's that December line. And that's the November 2nd, 2020. That's when the NCTAP program kicked in. If you incentivize something, you'll get more of it. They incentivized behavior. They got the behavior they incentivized. And they killed people in hospitals with whether it's remdesivir, baricitinib, or the rest of the cocktail and ventilators. Excess acute kidney injury in 2020 was nearly all because so many people died in that first wave. I told you about that. And prevalence of cause, I explained that. Moving on. Okay, paragraph 8 of the Connecticut Memoranda Series, Volume 2, extrapolation of the 3 states. So if I were to take those 3 states, and I showed you the tables, so the 3,500 excess deaths in Massachusetts, 2,400 in Minnesota, 1,721 in Connecticut, and you divide by the percentage of which is, I think it's 4.9% of the United States, it comes out to 155,000 excess, more than normal fatalities of acute kidney injury, 20 to 23. It's the biggest epidemic, and I say that with confidence because I have all the ages and I can do an analysis by age, and I'm talking life years lost. If you look at the average age of death being 75.8 throughout those years or close to it, you take the difference between the victims and the average age of death. How many years of life did they lose? A 25-year-old loses 50 years of life. An 81-year-old, I just assigned the value of 1. They lost 1 year of life. And as you do this, and you look at COVID and you look at smallpox and everything else, there's nothing greater than acute kidney injury or acute renal failure, sudden kidney failure. There's nothing greater in 100 years except for World War II. That's it. More facts. Let's see. So in paragraph 9, note when the dashed line, and the dashed line is, this is fiscal years. So this is the fiscal year of July 1st, 2020 through June 30th of 2021. And there's a reason why I do that. I show both calendar and fiscal in my graphs, and I have hundreds, probably over 1,000 graphs of this. In another document, you can see them all. So the dashed line clearly depicts that the acute kidney injury epidemic began in December 2020, right here, right? Here's December. The gap starts widening. And as the gap widens between the gray lines, which are 2015 through 2019, as this gap widens, that means there's more and more and more happening than normal. If it goes up and stays parallel, that means it was only an event when it went up. When it's parallel, it's not more than the other one. But this gap widens the entire time. Please now note that data is not just numbers. Yeah, I got to say this again. I don't like graphs because graphs are people. Every pixel on here represents a person. And, people lost a lot of family members, whether it's children, parents, brothers, sisters, friends. I like to say that more often. I'm surprised I got to this point. I'm going to read some questions again, see what's going on. Made it very clear. Good. The EVM is a farce. Good. So there's no direct questions. I'll move on. And again, this is from a document that was given to the officials of the state of Connecticut, and I can prove that they all got it 2 months ago. So paragraph 10, approximately 1,200 hospital homicide cases are documented at the website COVID-19 Humanity Betrayal Memory Project. They're a great group. They are involved in some lawsuits. They've documented hospital homicides to a degree that nobody else in the world has. It's a great resource. If you lost somebody, please go register it at their website. Please now note that data is not just numbers. I said that in the last one. So these are true accounts of criminal conduct. The NIH treatment protocols killed these people. Omission of investigation constitutes deliberate indifference to life. That's a mens rea standard used mostly in the federal level. States have things like criminal negligence, but the original like common law terms are you got purposeful, knowing, reckless, and negligent. Those are 4 different levels of mens rea or the criminal mind. Deaths that flow from omission of investigation and remedial action constitutes murder. Investigation is the primary mission of the Connecticut Department of Public Health agents. Omission of their primary mission is willful in light of a legal duty to act. And a legal duty to act, I've explained before, is if you take a job to do something and the public relies on you to do it, and your purposeful omission of that conduct, or you purposely don't want to do it, then you're responsible for what happens, not just in a negligent way, but in a purposeful criminal way, such as a lifeguard that watches a boy drown and says, that was kind of fun to watch, and he just wanted to see him drown. He had a legal duty to save that boy. He was trained, and he took that spot as a lifeguard away from somebody else. The same goes for people at the Department of Public Health. They're alerted to imminent danger of harm to society. They have a legal duty to investigate. Okay, arguments and analysis is another section after the facts. Remember, I was numbering the paragraphs. I was telling you, paragraph number 10. Those are called enumerated paragraphs. Those are factual allegations. They have facts in them. And now I'm describing what happened in those facts, and I'm applying some law to it and some analysis. So Connecticut state agents have a legal duty to act on the factual information provided herein. You are like lifeguards. You took the job. People are drowning in front of your eyes. If you do nothing, then you are criminally liable for their unnatural deaths. And a homicide is an unnatural death. It doesn't mean it's a murder or even manslaughter. A homicide is the unnatural killing of a human by another human. Homicide, hominid, people. The public relies on you to investigate and alert them of epidemics of death and maim. That is your contract with the people. Breach of this social contract is criminal. Any reasonable person would believe that an investigation is immediately required for the safety of the public. Connecticut's own vital records were compiled, graphed, and served to you in a concise manner. I did all the work. I'm showing them all these deaths. I can name every one of those 1,721 people. I have all their names. They have a legal duty to do a modicum of the work that I did to save the people of Connecticut from harm. More argument and analysis. You've been notified, it's an important word, of the epidemic of acute kidney injury. You are in a knowing state of mind. To be convicted of murder, you must have a requisite mental state at the time of the action or inaction, remember, omission of conduct, that caused an unnatural loss of life. The mental states that rise to second-degree murder are knowing and reckless. So purposeful is a first-degree murder standard. You intended to kill that person with deliberation and premeditation. Knowing and reckless, still murder, but not first degree. And they're also not negligent. And don't confuse criminal negligence. Criminal negligence is reckless. It's confusing the way some states write that. Criminal negligence and deliberate indifference. Those are two other terms states use. Deliberate indifference, I believe the Fed uses that a lot in cases. But these are all mental states, and it's murder. It's not manslaughter. Okay, there's a difference. The average person does not have a legal duty to investigate an epidemic, but they do. They took the job. Your mere inaction to investigate while in a knowing state of mind that people are dying at epidemic rates from acute kidney injury is enough for conviction. If you do not immediately and earnestly investigate these acute kidney injury deaths, it is equivalent to a boy drowning while you as a lifeguard make some popcorn and sit in the lifeguard chair watching him go under and die. These are quotes from the document that I gave them. If you do nothing, then you are betting that National Institutes of Health hospital protocols and COVID gene drug vaccines are not causal in the deaths of 1 million people in the United States. Or you are betting there will never be an administration that comes into power that will investigate and prosecute deliberate indifference murder with a depraved heart. The recommendations section below provides you a simple investigation procedure. Again, just do your job. I mean, that's all I'm asking. All I'm asking is do your job. I mean, this is just so easy to me for them to do. I'm one guy. They have how many thousand? I don't know how many thousands of people work there. I don't know what they do, but they're not doing public health. All right. A, under the investigation and planning recommendations, immediately verify the Connecticut data herein provided. You will learn that there is indeed a century-level epidemic of AKI death in Connecticut and every other state in the country. I'm trying to get somebody from England to take a look at theirs. They had the midazolam culling or kill off or whatever you want to call it, murder. So I'm wondering if they use different protocols, maybe it manifested in different causes of death that were in excess. I'd really like to know that. I just don't have time to investigate. Anyway, so let's see. B, begin investigating the younger groups. It will be easier and faster to find anomalies in younger age groups. 94 deaths in Connecticut from 2020 through 2023 involving acute kidney injury in ages 25 to 44. 184 involved deaths in the period in the 45 to 54 age group. You see what I'm saying? If you go into an investigation, you go and look at all of them, it's like, wow, this is like a few thousand people for me to look at. And they had other causes of death. Well, yeah, that's old people. If you look at younger people, and there are fewer causes of death. They died from fewer things because younger people are generally healthy. You can have a guy or maybe 3 investigators. You can go through these 184 and 94 deaths pretty quickly. And you can very quickly determine from a forensic investigation of their medical files, which the state would have access to. From those medical files, you have their vital signs every hour while they're in the hospital. You have the blood labs every day. What were their creatinine levels? What were their liver enzymes? You have the medications they got, whether oral or intravenous, to the minute when they got them. It's in the notes. It would not take a week or two to determine what caused acute kidney failure. So I write, obtain entire hospital file without notice so that it cannot be tampered with. They're the state. They can say, give it to me now. We have a court order, or we don't need a court order. We have the administrative license to do so. All right. Under that, like I was saying, build a timeline, vital signs, diagnoses and orders, blood labs, imaging, medicaments, procedures. Were they vaccinated? How many times was it written in the file that they were vaccinated? If you don't know why I wrote that, I'll do number 3 and then I'll explain. Was there a different course of treatment for the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated? We need to know that. I mean, we know it. Some of us know it. Some of us know it, especially the families who lived through it know it. When certain hospitals and certain people found out that somebody was not vaccinated, they got the full treatment that very few people are going to survive. They killed the unvaccinated and they drove up COVID death numbers by doing so. Sorry, it's not just how I feel. When you speak to people and you get the data, that's a fact. Problem is, I need the official data from medical files. And that takes a lot. For me, it's almost impossible. For any state government, it's a week's worth of work. They're hiding all of it. So D, interview family members. What was said, what was heard, what they thought they were signing. Was there a DNR, do not resuscitate? Who requested it? Was it coerced? And then publish the results, inform the people. Then the people will individually decide whether to consent under natural law and individual liberties to radical experimental gene therapy drugs and NIH-recommended COVID-19 protocols. When the people get informed, they're not going to take these things. The problem is they've kept us from being informed. Conclusions. Well, I think it's pretty obvious there's an epidemic of acute kidney injury in Connecticut. The AKI epidemic claimed more life years and affected more families than did the disease named COVID. Also more than polio, more than smallpox, more than H1N1, more than Hong Kong flu, or anything else except for World War II. There is not a statute of limitations for murder. Qualified and sovereign immunities do not avail to criminal charges. Officials have a legal duty to immediately investigate and prevent further injury and death. Inaction and failure to investigate could possibly lead to murder charges. Many, for the rest of their lives, will pursue criminal prosecution of officials who knowingly refuse to investigate acute kidney injury, a result of NIH, FDA, and CDC. The righteous way to proceed is to uncover truth in order to protect life and liberty. I'm going to stop sharing now. Anybody has any questions, please type them in the Rumble search bar. Did you see what I was trying to do with the document? Do you understand that it lasts forever? And even if it's 20 years from now, when somebody does a full analysis, they'll be able to look back through the records and find that they were informed, they were alerted, they did know. I've put them in the knowing state of mind, which is so important for criminal prosecution. Nothing's going to get done unless people feel personally that their safety or their life or their freedom is threatened. Individuals who think that they have the protection of the government will continue to kill, maim, injure, disturb the public. They don't care. You know what they care about? If they're going to go to jail. They're going to stop doing what they're doing as soon as laws are enforced. And I just hope that, whether it's Kash Patel or Robert F. Kennedy Jr., whoever becomes AG, I don't have a law degree, but I'm pretty smart and I can work hard. Please invite me there, and I want to clean this up. No, nothing's going to change if people are allowed to continue to kill 1 million Americans as they have. They're going to kill another million if they can. It needs to stop.